My father threw a party and he invited everyone he knew. Then he pulled out my school transcript and read my grades out loud like he was announcing a winner. But the winner was not me. I was the joke. 5 years later, he showed up at my art show with all the same guests. He thought he was going to laugh at me again. He had no idea I built the whole night for him. My name is Sophia, and for 22 years, I thought I was the family disappointment. I want you to imagine the worst moment of your life. The moment that plays in your head at 3 in the morning when you cannot sleep. The moment that shaped every decision you made afterward. For me, that moment happened on a hot July evening when I was 17 years old. My father, Richard, decided to throw a summer party at our house in Ohio. He called it the Summer Solstice Success Showcase. That was his name for it. He loved giving things grand names. He said the party was to celebrate his promotion to regional manager. But my father never did anything without an audience. And I was his favorite target. I remember standing at the top of the stairs, looking down at the living room filled with people. Everyone was laughing, holding wine glasses, eating little sandwiches my mother spent all day making. My father was in the center, as always, telling some story where he was the hero. He had that loud laugh that filled the whole house. I used to think that laugh meant safety. By that night, I knew it meant danger. The party had been going for about 2 hours when my father clinked his glass with a spoon. That sound made my stomach drop. I was in the kitchen, helping my mom refill ice buckets. I looked at her face. She knew what was coming too. She had that frozen smile she always wore when my father was about to do something cruel. She never stopped him. I am not angry at her anymore, but back then, I wished just once she would speak up. My father said, "Everyone, quiet down. I have something special to share." My cousin Mark laughed and said, "Richard is going to show us his new car again." Everyone chuckled, but my father shook his head. He said, "No, this is better. This is about my daughter, Sophia, my beautiful, talented, brilliant daughter." He said the words like they were poison in his mouth. I walked into the living room doorway. Everyone turned to look at me. I was wearing a blue dress my mom bought at a discount store. My hair was in a ponytail because I did not have the energy to style it. I was just a normal teenage girl who liked reading books and drawing in her sketchbook. I was not a failure, but my father was about to convince everyone I was. He pulled out a folded piece of paper from his back pocket. Even from across the room, I recognized it. It was my end-of-year transcript. My grades had dropped that semester. Not because I was stupid, but because I had been secretly working 2 part-time jobs after school to save money for a drawing tablet. I was exhausted. I had also been helping my mom take care of my little brother, Leo, who had severe asthma. There were many nights I slept on the floor of Leo's room, listening to him breathe, just in case something happened. My father never helped with Leo. He said that was women's work. My father unfolded the transcript and held it up like a trophy. He said, "Let me read you the highlights. English, C-, Math, D, History, D+, Science, C." And then he paused and looked at me with this smile that was not a smile. He said, "Art, A, because of course the failure needs an easy class to feel good about herself." People shifted uncomfortably. My Aunt Sarah said, "Richard, maybe this isn't the time," but my father held up his hand. He said, "No, Sarah, we need honesty in this family. We need to face reality." Sophia is 17 years old. She has no ambition, no discipline, no future. Last week I found her drawing in her room instead of studying for her math final. Drawing, like that's a career, like that will pay the bills. My grandmother, my mom's mom, said, "Richard, please." But my father was on a roll. He said, "I am doing this because I love her." Someone has to be honest with her. She is a failure. She has always been a failure. And unless she changes everything about herself, she will always be a failure. I looked at my mom. She was staring at the floor. My little brother Leo was in his room upstairs with the babysitter, so at least he did not have to hear this. I looked at the guests. Some looked horrified. Some looked amused. A few of my father's work friends were nodding along, like they agreed with him. I will never forget that feeling. Standing in a room full of adults being called a failure and no one stopping it. No one saying, "This is wrong." No one saying, "She is just a kid." My father folded the transcript and put it back in his pocket. He said, "So everyone, let this be a lesson. Hard work matters. Grades matter. Being realistic about your child's limitations matters. Then he raised his glass and said, "To reality." A few people awkwardly raised their glasses, most just stood there in silence. I turned around and walked out of the room. I walked up the stairs. I walked into my bedroom. I closed the door. And then I did not cry. I sat on my bed and stared at the wall for a long time. Then I opened my sketchbook and drew a picture of a door with no handle. And underneath it I wrote, "Someday I will find the way out." That night, after all the guests left, my father came to my room. He did not apologize. He never apologized. He said, "I hope you learned something tonight." I said, "I did." He said, "Good." Then he closed my door and went to bed. What I learned was not what he thought I learned. I learned that my father was not a safe person. I learned that my mother would not protect me. I learned that the only person who could save Sophia was Sophia herself. And I learned that one day, I would prove every single person in that room wrong. I also learned the name of my shame, the Summer Solstice Success Showcase. He had printed invitations with that title. My mother kept one in her jewelry box. I found it months later when I was looking for spare change. The invitation was cream-colored with gold lettering. It said, "You are cordially invited to celebrate Richard Martinez's promotion. Summer Solstice Success Showcase. Cocktails at 7, humiliation of daughter to follow." That last part was not written, but it might as well have been. 5 years later, I am standing in a very different living room. This one is in Manhattan. It has floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. The furniture is modern and expensive. There is art on the walls, not prints, real art. And one of those paintings is mine. That is not the revenge yet. That is just the setup. The revenge took patience. It took planning. It took becoming someone my father never expected I could be. Let me tell you how I got here. The morning after the Summer Solstice Success Showcase, I woke up at 5 a.m. I did not sleep much. I made myself a promise. I would graduate high school. I would go to college. I would never ask my father for a single dollar. And I would become a successful artist. Not because I wanted to prove him wrong. That was part of it, but mostly because I wanted to prove myself right. I had always known I had talent, but talent without discipline is just a wish. And I was done wishing. I started by changing my schedule. I quit one of my part-time jobs and found a tutoring job that paid better. I went to my teachers and asked for extra credit. I stayed after school for help in math and history. I stopped drawing for fun and started drawing with purpose. I entered every art contest I could find. Most of them I lost, but some I won. Small wins. A $50 prize here, $100 there. I saved every penny. My father noticed the changes, but he did not celebrate them. He said, "Finally, you are acting like a normal human being." He never asked what motivated me. He never wondered why I suddenly became so driven. He just assumed his public humiliation had worked, that his tough love had fixed me. I let him believe that. It was easier that way. But inside, I was breaking and rebuilding at the same time. There were nights I would lie in bed and replay his words. Failure, no ambition, no future. The words became a loop in my head. I would whisper to myself, "He is wrong, he is wrong, he is wrong." And then I would get up and study for another hour. I turned his cruelty into fuel. It was not healthy, but it worked. My senior year, I applied to 7 art schools. I did not tell my father. I used my own money for application fees. I spent months working on my portfolio. Every piece told a story. There was a painting of a girl standing in a doorway, surrounded by shadows, reaching for a light she could barely see. There was a drawing of a father's back, turned away from his daughter. There was a sculpture made from broken plates, glued back together with gold. It was about being broken and still beautiful. I remember the night I finished my portfolio. I laid all the pieces out on my bedroom floor. I sat cross-legged and looked at them for an hour. I cried, not because I was sad, but because I saw myself in each piece. The girl in the doorway was me. The father's back was mine. The broken plates were my family. And the gold was the future I was trying to glue together. I whispered to myself, "You are not a failure. You are an artist, and artists do not quit." When the acceptance letters came, I opened them alone in my room. I got into 4 schools. The best one was the School of the Art Institute of Chicago. They offered me a partial scholarship. The rest I would need to pay with loans and work. I sat on my bed and held that letter and cried. Not sad tears, happy tears. scared tears, because leaving meant I would have to tell my father I was leaving. And I knew he would not approve. I told my mom first. She was in the kitchen making dinner. I showed her the letter. She read it and her face did something complicated. She looked proud for 1 second, then she looked terrified. She said, "Your father will never agree to this. Art school. He will say it's a waste of money." I said, "I am not asking for his money. I am just telling him I am going." My mom shook her head and said, "You don't understand. He will find a way to stop you. He always finds a way." I said, "Let him try." My mom started crying. She said, "Sophia, I am so sorry. I am so sorry I did not stop him at the Summer Solstice Success Showcase. I should have said something. I should have protected you." I said, "Mom, it is okay." She said, "It is not okay. It will never be okay. But I am proud of you. I have always been proud of you. I just did not know how to show it." That was the first time my mother said she was proud of me. I held on to those words like a lifeline. That night at dinner, I told my father I was moving to Chicago after graduation to attend art school. He put down his fork. He looked at me like I had just announced I was joining a cult. He said, "Art school? You barely passed high school. You think you can survive college? You think someone will pay you to draw pictures?" I said, "I already have a scholarship. I will work for the rest." He laughed. He actually laughed. He said, "Sophia, be realistic. You are not that talented. You are not that smart. You will fail within 1 semester. You will come back here with debt and shame, and I will not help you. Do you understand? I will not give you a single dollar." I said, "I do not want your dollars. I want you to stay out of my way." He stood up from the table and pointed at the door. He said, "Then get out of my house. You want to be an artist? Start now. Leave." My mom said, "Richard, please." He said no, she made her choice. She wants to be a failure, she can be a failure somewhere else. I looked at my mom. She was crying. I looked at Leo. He was 11 and he looked so scared. I walked over to Leo and hugged him and whispered, "I will call you every week. I promise." Then I went to my room and packed 1 suitcase. I left my sketchbooks behind. There were too many to carry. I took my clothes, my phone charger, my savings envelope with $2,000, and my portfolio. I walked out the front door and did not look back, but I heard my father say one more thing as the door closed. He said, "Good riddance." Those 2 words followed me down the driveway, they followed me onto the bus, they followed me to my friend's couch, they followed me for years, good riddance, like I was trash, like I was nothing. I decided then that I would become something so undeniable that he would choke on those words. I slept on a friend's couch for the rest of senior year. My mom snuck me money when she could. Leo called me at night when my father was asleep. I graduated high school with a C+ average. Not great, but enough. I walked across the stage and my father was not there. My mom was. She clapped and cried. Leo waved from the audience. That was enough. But I will tell you something true. Walking across that stage without my father in the audience broke something in me. I wanted him to see me graduate, not because I wanted his approval, but because I wanted him to see that I did it without him, that I survived, that I was still standing. But he chose not to come. He told my mom he had a golf game, on his daughter's graduation day. That is who Richard Martinez was. That is who he will always be. Chicago changed me. I lived in a tiny studio apartment with 3 other art students. We had 1 bathroom and a hot plate for cooking. I worked 20 hours a week at a coffee shop and 10 hours a week as a gallery assistant. I took out student loans. I ate a lot of ramen. I was tired all the time, but I was happy. For the first time in my life, no one was calling me a failure. My teachers saw something in me. They pushed me. They challenged me. They told me I had a unique voice. My second year, one of my professors submitted my work to a juried exhibition. I won 3rd place. It was a small show in a small gallery, but someone came, someone important. Her name was Elena Vance. She owned a gallery in New York. She saw my painting of the girl in the doorway and she asked to meet me. She said, "You have something raw and real. When you graduate, come see me. Keep making work like this. Do not let anyone tell you it is not valuable." I held onto her business card like it was made of gold. But college was not easy. There were nights I wanted to quit. I remember one night in particular. It was finals week of my 3rd year. I had 3 papers due, a final project for my painting class, and I had just learned that my student loan had been delayed. I had $23 in my bank account. I sat on the floor of my studio and I cried. I cried so hard I could not breathe. And then I heard my father's voice in my head. Failure, no ambition, no future. I almost believed him. I almost packed my bags. I almost called my mom and said, I am coming home. But then I thought about the summer solstice success showcase. I thought about the way he smiled when he read my grades. I thought about the way the guests looked at me, and I got angry, not a destructive anger, a productive anger. I wiped my tears, I made a pot of coffee, and I worked for 18 hours straight. I finished my papers. I finished my painting. And I passed every class. That is the thing about being called a failure your whole life. You either crumble or you become unbreakable. I chose unbreakable. The next 3 years were hard, harder than I can explain. There were nights I cried because I was so tired. There were days I wanted to quit and go back to Ohio just to have a warm meal and a bed that was not a mattress on the floor. But every time I thought about giving up, I remembered that night at the party. I remembered my father's smile as he read my grades. I remembered the way no one stopped him. I remembered the girl I used to be, standing in that doorway, feeling so small. I kept going for her. I graduated summa cum laude. That means with highest honor. I was not a failure. I was not stupid. I was just a girl who needed to get away from a man who wanted her to stay small so he could feel big. My mom came to graduation. Leo came too. He was 15 and almost as tall as me. My father did not come. He told my mom to tell me he was busy with work. I knew the truth. He was busy being wrong and too proud to admit it. After graduation, I moved to New York. I had saved $5,000. I had a small loan from a family friend. I had Alina's business card. I called her my first week in the city. She remembered me. She invited me to her gallery. She looked at my new work and she said, Sophia, I want to give you a show. A solo show, in 6 months. Are you ready? I said yes. Then I went home to my tiny Brooklyn apartment and threw up from fear. A solo show in a real New York gallery. That was the dream. But what if I failed? What if my father was right? What if I was not good enough? I spent the next 6 months making the best art of my life. I painted every day. Sometimes I painted all night. I explored themes of family, rejection, silence, and survival. I painted a series of portraits of people who had been publicly humiliated. Their faces were blurred, but their eyes were sharp. I painted a huge canvas of a dinner party where all the guests had no faces. Only the father at the head of the table had a face. And that face was a mask. I painted a triptych of a girl falling. In the first panel, she is falling alone. In the second, she is caught by strangers. In the third, she is flying. I also painted a small, private painting that I did not show anyone. It was a painting of the summer solstice success showcase. I painted it exactly as I remembered it. The living room, the guests, the transcript in my father's hand, the girl in the doorway. I painted it in one night. I cried the whole time. When I finished, I looked at it and I said out loud, I forgive you, not him, not my father. I forgave myself for believing I was a failure, for thinking his words were true, for carrying that shame for so long. I forgave myself. And then I put the painting in a closet. I was not ready to show it yet, but I knew someday I would be. The night of the show, I wore a black dress that made me feel powerful. My mom flew in from Ohio. Leo came too, a few friends from college, and I invited my father. I sent him an invitation in the mail. It said, Sophia Martinez. I stopped using my father's name years ago. I wrote on the invitation, Richard, you called me a failure in front of everyone at the Summer Solstice Success Showcase. Now I am inviting you to see what failure looks like 5 years later. Come if you dare. He came. I did not think he would. But he came, and he brought guests. He brought the same people from that party 5 years ago, his work friends, his golf buddies, my Aunt Sarah, even my grandparents. He wanted an audience. He always wants an audience. But this time, the audience was not on his side. The gallery was packed. Alina had done an amazing job with promotion. Critics came, collectors came. The art world in New York is small and curious. People wanted to see the young artist who painted pain so beautifully. I stood near the entrance, greeting people, smiling, shaking hands. My heart was pounding so hard I thought everyone could hear it. Then I saw him. My father walked in wearing an expensive suit. He looked older. His hair was gray at the temples. His face was softer. But his eyes were the same. Hard, judging. He looked around the gallery with an expression I knew well. He was looking for something to criticize. Behind him came his entourage. They looked uncomfortable. They knew why they were there. My father had told them, probably with a laugh, that he was going to see his failure daughter's little art show. I walked over to him. I said, "Richard." "Thank you for coming." He said, "Sophia, you look different." I said, "I am different." Then I gestured to the gallery and said, "Please enjoy the show." He wandered through the rooms with his group. I watched from across the room. I saw the moment he stopped in front of a painting. It was a large canvas. It showed a living room. A party, a father standing in the center, holding up a piece of paper. His mouth was open mid-laugh. His other hand was pointing at a teenage girl standing in a doorway. The girl's face was not painted clearly, but her posture was unmistakable. She was shrinking. She was trying to disappear. The painting was called The Lesson. My father stared at it for a long time. His face went pale. One of his golf buddies said, "Richard, is that?" My father did not answer. He moved to the next painting. This one was smaller. It showed a dining table, a mother looking down, a father pointing at the door, a teenage girl walking away with a suitcase. The painting was called Departure. He kept moving. Each painting told a piece of the story: the sleepless nights studying, the secret jobs, the acceptance letter, the solo show announcement, and then the final painting. It was the biggest one in the gallery. It took up an entire wall. It showed a woman standing on a stage. She was wearing a black dress. She was holding a paintbrush like a sword. Behind her was a crowd of people, but they were not painted clearly. What was clear was the woman's face. She was smiling, not a cruel smile, not a vengeful smile, a peaceful smile, the smile of someone who survived. The painting was called 5 Years Later. My father stood in front of that painting for a full minute. Then he turned around and looked for me. I was standing by the wine table, talking to an art critic from the New Yorker. My father walked over and interrupted. He said, "Sophia, we need to talk." I said, "I am busy right now." He said, "This is important." I said, "So is my career." Then I turned back to the critic and continued our conversation. My father waited. He stood there like a man who was not used to waiting. His guests stood awkwardly behind him. I finished my conversation, shook hands with the critic, and turned to my father. I said, "What do you want to say?" He looked at me, and for the first time in my life, I saw something in his eyes that was not anger or judgment. I saw fear. He said, "You painted all of this." I said, "Yes." He said, "People will see this. They will know." I said, "Yes." He said, "They will know what you think of me." I said, "They will know what you did at the Summer Solstice Success Showcase." His voice dropped. He said, "I am your father." I said, "You were my father. Now you are just a man I used to know." He said, "I came here tonight because I wanted to see if you had actually become something. And you have. You have become vengeful and bitter." I said, "No, I have become honest. You called me a failure in front of everyone. You humiliated me. You kicked me out of your house. You told me I would never succeed. I am not vengeful. I am just showing people the truth. If the truth makes you uncomfortable, that is not my problem." My father's face turned red. He said, "You think you are better than me?" I said, "I do not think about you at all." That was the moment. The moment I had been waiting for since I was 17 years old. Not a dramatic speech. Not a screaming match. Just a quiet truth delivered without anger. "I do not think about you at all." Those words hit my father harder than any insult ever could, because they were true. I had spent years building a life that had no room for him. I had become someone who did not need his approval, his criticism, or his presence. He was irrelevant, and he knew it. He stood there, mouth open, trying to think of something to say, but there was nothing. For once in his life, Richard Martinez had no words. He turned around and walked toward the exit. His guests hesitated, then followed. My Aunt Sarah paused and looked at me. She said, "I always knew you had it in you, Sophia. I am sorry I did not speak up that night at the Summer Solstice Success Showcase." I said, "You are here now. That is what matters." After they left, I stood in the middle of the gallery and looked around. People were smiling. People were buying art. People were saying my name with respect. Elena came over and put her hand on my shoulder. She said, "Your father left." I said, "I know." She said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I am more than okay. I am free." But I was not completely free yet. There was one more thing I had to do. A week after the show, I went back to the gallery alone at night. I unlocked the door and walked through the empty rooms. The paintings were still up. The lights were dim. It was quiet. I walked to the closet in the back office. I opened it and took out the small painting I had hidden. The painting of the Summer Solstice Success Showcase. I had never shown it to anyone. I had never even looked at it since the night I painted it. I carried it to the main gallery. I hung it on an empty wall, and then I stood in front of it. For the first time, I really looked at it. The girl in the doorway, the father with the transcript, the guests with their wine glasses and their uncomfortable smiles, the mother looking at the floor. It was all there, every painful detail. I started to cry, not sad tears, not happy tears, release tears. I said out loud I was there. I survived that, I am here now. And then I did something I never thought I would do. I forgave my father. Not because he deserved it, not because he asked for it, but because I was tired of carrying the weight of my anger. Forgiveness is not about the other person. Forgiveness is about setting yourself free. I whispered to the painting, "I forgive you, Richard, not for you, for me," and then I left the painting there. The next morning, Alina saw it. She asked me what it was. I told her. She said, "Do you want to show it?" I said, "Yes, I want everyone to see it. That is the final piece of the puzzle. That is the truth." When the gallery opened that day, people gathered around the new painting. They read the title, "The Summer Solstice Success Showcase." They looked at the girl in the doorway. They looked at the father with the transcript, and they felt something. I do not know what each person felt, but I know what I felt. I felt complete. The show was a success. I sold 12 paintings that night. A collector bought the lesson for $10,000. $10,000 for a painting of my own humiliation. There is poetry in that. The thing that was meant to break me became the thing that built me. But the story does not end there, because revenge is not a single moment. Revenge is the life you build after someone tries to destroy you. Over the next few years, my career grew. I had more shows. I was written about in magazines. I won awards. I bought an apartment. I adopted a cat named Monet. I fell in love with a woman named Riley who reads my emotions before I even understand them myself. I became happy, truly happy. Not the fake happiness of proving someone wrong, the real happiness of proving yourself right. My father tried to reach out a few times. He sent letters. He sent emails. He even showed up at my gallery once. I did not respond to the letters. I did not open the emails. When he showed up at my gallery, I told the security guard to ask him to leave. Some people say you should forgive family no matter what. I disagree. Forgiveness is not something you owe someone. Forgiveness is something you give yourself when you are ready. I was ready. But that did not mean I had to let him back into my life. Forgiveness and reconciliation are not the same thing. I forgave him in my heart, but I did not open the door. My mom and I have a good relationship now. She left my father 2 years after I moved to Chicago. She said she finally realized that if she could not protect her own daughter, she could not protect herself either. She lives in a small house in Ohio with a garden and 2 dogs. Leo is in college studying computer science. He calls me every Sunday. My father lives alone in the big house where the Summer Solstice Success Showcase happened. I heard from my Aunt Sarah that he does not have many friends anymore. People stopped coming to his parties. They said he was too negative, too cruel, too hard to be around. I do not feel sad for him. I also do not feel happy. I feel nothing. That is the victory, not hate, not anger. Indifference. The opposite of love is not hate, it is indifference. And I am completely indifferent to Richard Martinez. Last month, I had my biggest show yet. It was at a museum in New York. The museum bought 3 of my paintings for their permanent collection. One of them was the Summer Solstice Success Showcase. It now hangs in a museum. Thousands of people will see it. They will see the girl in the doorway. They will see the father with the transcript. And they will think their own thoughts. Some will see their own families. Some will see their own pain. Some will see hope. That is the power of art. It takes one person's story and makes it everyone's story. At the opening, a journalist asked me what advice I would give to young artists who feel like failures. I thought for a moment, and then I said this. I said, failure is not a grade. Failure is not a test score. Failure is not what your parents say about you at a dinner party. Failure is giving up on yourself before anyone else has the chance to. As long as you keep going, you have not failed. You have just not finished yet. The journalist wrote that down. The next day, the quote was in the newspaper. Someone sent it to my father. I do not know who. But my Aunt Sarah told me he read it and then sat in his chair for a long time without speaking. She said he looked like a man who had spent his whole life building a wall, only to realize he was on the wrong side of it. I do not need him to realize anything. I do not need his apology. I do not need his approval. I do not need him to tell people he was wrong. I only needed one thing. I needed to become someone that 17-year-old girl would be proud of. And I have. My name is Sophia Martinez. I am an artist. I am a survivor. I am not a failure. I never was. I was just a seed that needed better soil. And I found it, I grew, I bloomed, and I did it all without him. That is my story, but it is not just my story. It is the story of anyone who has ever been told they are not enough. Anyone who has been publicly humiliated by someone who was supposed to love them. Anyone who has been called a failure and felt that word settle into their bones like a splinter. You can remove the splinter. It might hurt. It might leave a scar, but you can remove it. And then you can grow. 5 years after that terrible night at the Summer Solstice Success Showcase, I stood in a museum looking at my own painting on the wall. It was the lesson. The museum had bought it. People stood in front of it, reading the placard. It said, Sophia Martinez, American painter. Born 1998. Known for exploring themes of family trauma and resilience. This painting depicts a pivotal moment in the artist's adolescence, when her father publicly humiliated her for her academic performance at his self-named Summer Solstice Success Showcase. It took her 5 years to turn that moment into art. She considers it her first masterpiece. I stood there and watched strangers look at my pain and see something beautiful. That is the alchemy of art. That is the alchemy of survival. You take the thing that almost destroyed you and you turn it into something that saves someone else. I do not know if my story will save anyone. But if you are reading this and you feel like a failure, please know this. You are not what people say you are what you do next. And what you do next is always, always your choice. My father mocked me in front of all his guests at the Summer Solstice Success Showcase. He showed them my transcript. He called me a failure. 5 years later, I had a solo show in New York City. 5 years later, critics called me a rising star. 5 years later, my father stood in my gallery and had no power over me. 5 years later, I was free. And that is the best revenge there is, not making someone suffer, but building a life so full, so bright, so completely your own, that the person who tried to break you becomes nothing more than a footnote. A small, sad character in the first chapter of a much longer and much better story. My name is Sophia Martinez, and I am the author of my own life. No one else gets to write it, not anymore. Thank you for listening. Now go write your own story. And do not let anyone else hold the pen. I think about that 17-year-old girl sometimes. The one who stood in the doorway in her blue discount store dress. The one who heard her father call her a failure in front of everyone. The one who drew a door with no handle in her sketchbook. I want to go back in time and hug her. I want to tell her, you are going to be okay. You are going to be more than okay. You are going to be magnificent, but she does not need me to tell her that. She already knows. She is the one who kept going. She is the one who never gave up. She is the one who became me. And I am proud of her. I am proud of us. The Summer Solstice Success Showcase. That name used to make me feel sick. Now it just sounds like a sad man's sad party. A man who needed to tear down his own daughter to feel tall. How small he must have been inside. How scared. I understand that now. I do not excuse it, but I understand it. My father was a scared man who hurt people because he did not know how else to be. That is tragic. But it is not my tragedy to fix. It never was. I have my own life now. My own family. Riley and I are talking about adopting a child someday. A little girl. And I will never, ever do to her what my father did to me. I will never call her a failure. I will never humiliate her in front of others. I will never kick her out of my house. I will break the cycle. That is the real revenge. Not just surviving, but making sure the pain dies with me. So that is my story. My name is Sophia Martinez, and I am not a failure. I never was, and neither are you.